You ever get that feeling? That gut-wrenching, skin-crawling sensation that something in your life is terribly wrong? It doesn't hit you all at once. It sneaks up on you, like a shadow moving just outside your line of sight, a whisper in the dark that you can't quite catch. I ignored that feeling for months, brushed it off, told myself I was being paranoid. But the truth doesn't care if you're ready for it. It comes for you anyway. That Tuesday night should have been like any other. I should have been sitting on the couch, half watching a documentary, sipping a whiskey, waiting for Scarlett to come home and kiss me on the cheek like always. But instead, I was standing in the doorway of our bedroom, watching her get ready like she was about to walk into a red carpet event. Her hair, flawless. Makeup, perfect. Perfume, stronger than usual. Going somewhere special? I asked, keeping my voice casual. She glanced at me in the mirror, just for a second. That hesitation? That was all it took. A fraction of a moment, but I caught it. Just a work dinner, she said, smoothing her dress down. School board stuff. I nodded, acted like I believed her. But inside, my mind was racing. Scarlett was a history teacher, not a board member. And last I checked, teachers didn't wear lace-trimmed dresses and stilettos to talk about school funding. But the real warning sign? She barely looked at me when she said it. Will Lucas be there? I asked, making sure my voice stayed neutral. Her fingers clenched for half a second before she picked up her purse. Yeah, he's helping coordinate it. Lucas Bennett. A name I'd heard too many times lately. The school's golden boy. Every student's favorite coach. And, apparently, my wife's new best friend. I forced a smile. All right, have fun. She kissed my cheek, the scent of vanilla and something sharp lingering in the air as she walked out the door. I stood there for a long time, staring at that door. And then, finally, I let myself admit what I already knew. Something was very, very wrong. When Scarlett's car disappeared down the street, I made my way to her vanity. It felt wrong to snoop, but I was past worrying about right and wrong. I needed clarity. My fingers skimmed through her jewelry box, her perfume bottles, until they found something unexpected, a key card. I picked it up, turning it over. It wasn't from any place I recognized. It was sleek, black, with a silver emblem reading Rosewood Hotel. I felt my pulse quicken. She said she was going to a work dinner. So why did she have a hotel key? A part of me wanted to throw the card away, to pretend I hadn't seen it, to keep my world intact for just a little longer. But the truth was already gnawing at me, whispering that I had been played for a fool. I grabbed my jacket and car keys. I was going to find out exactly what was going on. The Rosewood Hotel was a 15-minute drive from our house, a luxury boutique spot that catered to business professionals and out-of-town executives. The kind of place where discretion was guaranteed. I parked across the street, my hands gripping the steering wheel, my mind battling between denial and reality. Was I really doing this? Was I really about to spy on my wife? Yes, because I had to know. I entered the lobby, my heart pounding. I had no plan, no idea what I was going to do if I found what I feared. My palms were sweaty as I walked up to the receptionist, trying to appear casual. Hey, I said, forcing a smile. I think my wife left her room key at home. I just need to check if she's checked in yet. The receptionist, a young guy with perfectly styled hair, barely looked up from his computer. Name? Scarlett Walker. He typed quickly, then frowned. Sorry, sir. No reservation under that name. Relief surged through me, but it was short-lived. I hesitated, then took a gamble. What about Lucas Bennett? His fingers moved over the keyboard again. This time, his expression changed. Room 315. My stomach dropped. I thanked him quickly and moved away, my mind spinning. I stood at the base of the grand staircase, staring up toward the hallway that led to the rooms. I knew I couldn't just barge in, but I also knew that if I walked away now, I'd never forgive myself. I needed confirmation. My heart was hammering as I made my way up the stairs, each step feeling heavier than the last. I reached room 315 and stood there, frozen. There was only one way to know for sure. I knocked. Silence. Then, footsteps. The handle turned. The door opened just enough for me to see Lucas standing there, his shirt unbuttoned, his hair disheveled, the scent of Scarlett's perfume clinging to the air around him. His eyes widened in shock as he registered who I was. Caleb? His voice was strained, like he had just run a marathon. I didn't say a word. I didn't have to, because behind him, Scarlett was standing in nothing but a silk robe, her expression frozen in horror. And in that moment, everything I had ever believed about love, about trust, about my marriage, shattered into a million pieces. There's a moment between knowing the truth and fully accepting it. A brief, agonizing second where your brain fights back, trying to shield you from the inevitable. That was me, standing in the dimly lit hallway of the Rosewood Hotel, staring at my half-naked wife and the man who had just obliterated what was left of my trust. My heart pounded in my ears, but outwardly, I was completely still. Scarlett, Lucas, the two people I had never once questioned. Until now. Scarlett's hands trembled as she clutched the silk robe around her body, her lips slightly parted, as if she was about to say something. An excuse, an apology, a lie. Lucas shifted beside her, rubbing a hand over his jaw, avoiding my gaze. His face was a mix of regret and something else. Fear? No, not fear of what he had done. Fear of getting caught. It took everything in me not to let my hands curl into fists. I swallowed the lump in my throat, my voice low and controlled. How long? Scarlett flinched like I had struck her. Lucas opened his mouth, but I didn't give him the chance. I wasn't asking you, I said coldly, my eyes locked on Scarlett. Her green eyes glistened under the warm hotel light, and for a moment, I thought she might actually tell me the truth. But then she did what she had always done best, hesitated. And that hesitation was all I needed. I let out a slow, bitter laugh. Jesus, you don't even know what to say, do you? Scarlett's voice cracked. Caleb, please. How long? A shaky breath. Then, so quietly I almost didn't hear it, a few months. A few months. A few months of late nights and whispered phone calls. A few months of her leaving early, dressing differently, acting distant. And I had ignored it. Lucas had the nerve to step forward, palms up like some pathetic attempt at peace. Look, man, I know this is... I turned to him, my blood boiling. You shut your damn mouth. His lips pressed together. Good. At least he wasn't stupid enough to keep talking. I turned back to Scarlett, searching for any sign of the woman I had married. The woman I had spent the last 10 years loving, protecting, choosing, every single day. But I didn't recognize her anymore. Was it ever real? My voice barely above a whisper. Or was I just convenient? Tears slipped down her cheeks, but I felt nothing. I should have been angry. I should have wanted to scream, to break something, to make them feel even an ounce of what I was feeling. But the only thing I felt was a hollow, aching emptiness. Scarlett reached out like she was going to touch me. I stepped back. Don't. Her hand dropped. Lucas shifted again, clearly itching to leave. Coward. He thought that if he waited long enough, this would all blow over. That I'd yell, maybe throw a punch, and then walk away so he and Scarlett could sneak off and pretend like this never happened. He had no idea who he was dealing with. You two deserve each other, I said finally. I hope it was worth it. Scarlett let out a strangled sob. Caleb, please don't do this. I let out a breath through my nose, shaking my head. I didn't do anything, Scarlett. You did. And with that, I turned and walked away. She didn't follow me. I drove home in complete silence. My fingers gripped the steering wheel so tightly they ached. My heartbeat was steady now, my mind terrifyingly clear. Scarlett had called twice. I didn't answer. Then, another notification. Not from Scarlett. Natalie Pierce. I stared at her name on the screen. Of course, she knew. Natalie had always had a sixth sense about things like this. I swiped to answer. Her voice was quiet. You okay? I exhaled through my nose. No. She was silent for a moment. Then, I heard. What do you want to do? A simple question, but one that carried so much weight. I rubbed a hand down my face. I need to know how deep this goes. Natalie didn't hesitate. Okay. I need proof. My voice was stronger now, more sure. I need to see every message, every meeting, every lie. Then let's find out. She hung up, and I sat there in the dark, my mind already working. Scarlett thought she had one. Lucas thought he could slither away without consequences, but they had no idea what was coming. I sat in the dark, gripping my phone, the glow from the screen reflecting in my tired eyes. The weight of the last 24 hours pressed down on me, heavier than I'd ever imagined possible. The house was quiet. Too quiet. For years, Scarlett's presence had filled every inch of this space. The sound of her laughter in the mornings as she made coffee. The way she'd hum along to the radio while grading papers. Even her perfume still lingered in the air. But now, everything felt hollow, like a home that had already been abandoned. The phone vibrated in my hand. Another message. 8:32 p.m. Caleb, please, just talk to me. 9:12 p.m. I messed up. Okay, but can we just talk? Please? 11:42 p.m. Caleb, say something. Anything. I let out a breath and stared at the words on the screen. How do you even begin to respond to something like this? Do I ask her why? Do I let her try to explain? Do I even care? My fingers hovered over the keyboard. Then I locked the screen and set the phone down. I wasn't ready to hear her voice. Not yet. Maybe not ever. Instead, I grabbed my keys and walked out the door. I didn't know where I was going. I just drove. The city blurred past, headlights casting strange patterns against the wet pavement. My mind replayed the last few hours on a loop, images flashing through my head like some cruel movie reel. Scarlett. Lucas. That damn silk robe. I gripped the steering wheel tighter, my jaw clenched so hard it ached. Then, before I even realized where I was going, I was parked outside Pierce Investigations, Natalie's office. I hesitated for a second before stepping out of the car. She opened the door almost immediately, looking me up and down with knowing eyes. She didn't ask if I was okay. She already knew the answer. Come in, she said. I walked inside without a word. Natalie sat behind her desk, her laptop glowing in the dim room. A cold cup of coffee sat beside her, the scent mixing with the faint smell of old paper and dust. You want proof? It wasn't a question. I nodded. She sighed, cracking her knuckles. How deep do you want me to go? I swallowed the lump in my throat. All of it. An hour later, I had my answer. And it was worse than I could have ever imagined. Scarlett and Lucas hadn't just been sneaking around behind my back. They were planning something bigger. I stared at the screen as my stomach twisted. Lucas, can't wait to see you tonight. Same room, usual time. Scarlett, I wish I could just be with you already. He's getting suspicious. Lucas, then it's time to move faster. We'll get everything sorted soon. I scrolled further, my fingers numb. Bank transaction. $15,000. Joint account transfer. I felt sick. Scarlett hadn't just betrayed me. She had planned to leave me. I shut the laptop and ran a hand through my hair, my breath slow and measured. For the first time since this nightmare started, I wasn't heartbroken. I was angry. I grabbed my phone and dialed the one person who needed to know just as much as I did. Elena answered the door in sweatpants and an oversized sweater, her dark hair pulled into a messy ponytail. Her face was pale, eyes tired, like she hadn't slept. Neither had I. Caleb, she said cautiously. I didn't speak. I just held up my phone, the messages glowing on the screen. She stared at them for a long moment, her expression unreadable. Then, she let out a breath and stepped aside. Come in. We sat in her living room, the scent of coffee lingering in the air. I told her everything. She listened quietly, her hands wrapped around a mug, her fingers tracing the rim absent-mindedly. When I finished, she let out a quiet laugh, shaking her head. I should be crying, shouldn't I? I didn't know how to answer. She sighed. I knew something was off. Lucas was always hiding his phone, always stepping out to take a call. But I didn't want to believe it. I exhaled through my nose. They weren't just having an affair, Elena. They were saving up, planning something. She frowned. Planning what? I slid my phone across the table. 15 grand. A joint account. Her face went still. Then she let out a bitter laugh. Jesus. So they were really going to run off together. I didn't answer. For a long moment, we sat in silence, the weight of our broken marriages pressing down on both of us. Then, finally, she looked up at me. What do we do now? And that was when everything shifted. I wasn't just a betrayed husband anymore. And Elena wasn't just a heartbroken wife. We weren't powerless. I met her gaze, my voice steady. We make them regret it. Her lips curled into a slow, sharp smile. I like the way you think. That evening, I sent the message. 6:45 p.m. Dinner tonight? I think we should talk. Scarlett's response was instant. 6:46 p.m. Yes. Please. Where? I let her wait before answering. 7 p.m. La Bella Vita. 8 p.m. Just us. She thought this was her chance to fix things. She had no idea she was walking straight into a trap. I arrived early. The restaurant was warm, filled with the soft hum of conversation, the clinking of glasses, the occasional burst of laughter from a nearby table. It felt surreal to be sitting here, in a place where normal people came to enjoy their evenings, where couples celebrated anniversaries, where first dates sparked something new. And here I was, about to burn my entire marriage to the ground. I ran a hand along the tablecloth, my jaw tight as I glanced toward the entrance. Scarlett would be here any minute. My phone vibrated in my pocket. 7:55 p.m. I'm on my way. Thank you for this, Caleb. I know I don't deserve it. I let out a slow breath. She was right about that. The waiter approached, a polite smile on his face. Would you like to order a drink while you wait? I nodded. Whiskey. Neat. He left, and I sat back, staring at the empty seat across from me. I should have felt something. Sadness. Anger. Maybe even relief. But there was nothing. Just a cold, quiet focus. I had played the fool long enough. Tonight, Scarlett was going to see exactly what that mistake cost her. She walked in at exactly 8:03 p.m. I knew the moment she spotted me. Her posture shifted, shoulders relaxing slightly, relief washing over her face. She walked toward the table slowly, hesitantly, like she was waiting for me to change my mind and storm out before she even got the chance to sit down. I didn't. Instead, I watched as she pulled out the chair and settled across from me, her hands folding neatly in her lap. She looked different. Her makeup was softer, her hair pulled back into a simple bun instead of the styled waves she had worn at the hotel. She wasn't dressed to impress tonight, just jeans and a sweater, like she wanted to look safe, like she wanted me to see her as the woman I had fallen in love with. For a long moment, we just sat there, neither of us speaking. Then she let out a breath, her voice quiet. I didn't think you'd actually come. I swirled the whiskey in my glass before taking a sip, and yet, you still showed up. She flinched, just barely, before straightening. Because I wanted to see you. Because I need to talk to you. I leaned back in my chair. All right, talk. She swallowed hard. Caleb, I know I hurt you. I know what I did was unforgivable. But I swear to you, I never meant to. I held up a hand, stopping her. Don't say you never meant to hurt me. Her mouth snapped shut. I shook my head. You chose to do this, Scarlett. You made a decision, over and over again, for months. And you did it knowing exactly what it would do to me. Her fingers curled into fists on her lap. You weren't supposed to find out like that. I let out a sharp, bitter laugh. So what? If I had never walked into that hotel, you would have just kept lying? Kept sneaking around until you were ready to leave? Scarlett's breath hitched. Her eyes darted down, guilt pressing into every inch of her expression. I leaned forward. Tell me the truth. Were you going to tell me at all? Silence. Her lips parted like she wanted to say something, like she wanted to give me some kind of answer, but nothing came out. And that silence told me everything I needed to know. I exhaled, shaking my head. Unbelievable. Scarlett reached out then, her fingertips grazing the edge of my hand. Caleb, please. I know I don't deserve another chance, but I love you. I do. I pulled away. No, you don't. Tears welled in her eyes. Yes, I do. I tilted my head, watching her. Then why did you do it? She sucked in a sharp breath. I was lost. I felt disconnected. You were always working, always distant. And Lucas, he was there. He listened. I let out a slow breath, nodding slightly. So this is my fault. Her eyes widened. No, that's not what I meant. But that's what you're saying. I tapped a finger against the table. I was busy. So instead of talking to me, instead of telling me how you felt, you decided to sleep with another man. She wiped at her eyes, shaking her head. It wasn't just sex, Caleb. I stared at her. That's supposed to make me feel better? She looked down at her lap, shaking her head. No, I don't know how to make this right. I leaned back, my arms crossing over my chest. You can't. A single tear slipped down her cheek. You used to love me. I let out a slow, steady breath. I did. The truth was, a part of me still did. But love wasn't enough anymore. She reached for me again. Please, just tell me what I can do. I stared at her hand. The same hand that had probably touched him the way she used to touch me, and something inside me hardened. I met her gaze, voice low. You can sign the divorce papers when they get to you. Scarlett's breath caught. Her face crumbled. Caleb. I stood, tossing a few bills onto the table. Dinner's on me. She blinked up at me, tears streaming down her face. Please don't do this. I looked at her for a long, painful moment. Then I shook my head. I didn't do this, Scarlett. And with that, I turned and walked out, leaving her alone in the life she had ruined. The night air was sharp against my skin as I stepped out of the restaurant, but I barely felt it. I stood on the sidewalk, hands in my pockets, staring at nothing. Behind me, through the glass windows of La Bella Vita, I could see Scarlett still sitting at the table, shoulders hunched, her fingers curled around the napkin in her lap. She wasn't crying anymore. She just looked lost. I should have felt something. Pity, satisfaction, closure. But there was nothing. Just an empty, quiet calm. I turned and walked to my car. I didn't look back. I had barely pulled into my driveway when my phone rang. Elena. I answered without hesitation. How did it go? She asked, skipping the small talk. I shut the engine off and leaned back in the seat, rubbing my temple. Exactly as expected. A short silence. Then, she broke down? Yeah. Did she confess to everything? More or less. Made excuses, tried to justify it, but in the end, she knew there was no way out of it. Elena let out a slow breath. So she knows it's over. I stared at my hands on the steering wheel. Yeah. A pause. Then her voice softened. How do you feel? I swallowed hard. I don't know. Because that was the truth. For months, Scarlett had lied to my face. She had snuck around, let another man touch her, planned a whole future without me. And now that it was over, now that she had sat across from me in that restaurant and cried, I thought maybe I would feel something real, but I didn't. Maybe I had already mourned it. Maybe I had nothing left to give. Elena didn't push. She just exhaled. I served Lucas the papers today. That caught my attention. How did he take it? A humorless chuckle. Badly. I could almost hear the smirk in her voice. He didn't see it coming? I asked. Oh, he saw it coming. He just thought he could talk his way out of it. And she scoffed. He tried the whole I made a mistake. It didn't mean anything. Let's fix this routine. But when he realized I wasn't budging, he got angry. I wasn't surprised. Lucas had always been one of those men. Arrogant, smug, convinced he could charm his way out of anything. What did he say? That I was overreacting. That I should think about our history. That we could just pretend it never happened. I ran a hand down my face. Jesus. Yeah, she muttered. The worst part? I braced myself. What? He actually asked if I could keep things quiet, so it wouldn't hurt his reputation. I let out a short laugh, shaking my head. Unbelievable. Right? I could hear the anger in her voice, simmering beneath the surface. But there was something else there, too. Something I couldn't quite place. So, she said, clearing her throat, what now? I hesitated. That was the million-dollar question, wasn't it? What now? Scarlett and I were over. There was no saving it, no fixing it, no going back. The divorce papers would come, and we would sign them, and eventually, we would just be two people who used to love each other. Lucas and Elena were done, too. So what came next? For the first time in a long time, I didn't know. I guess we move on, I said finally. Elena hummed in agreement. Yeah, I guess we do. A beat of silence. Then, softly, do you want to get a drink? I glanced at the clock on my dashboard. It was late. Too late. But the idea of going inside, of sitting alone in that quiet, empty house, felt unbearable. Yeah, I said. Yeah, I do. We met at a small bar on the edge of town, the kind of place where no one asked questions and the whiskey was poured heavy. Elena was already there when I arrived, sitting in a booth near the back, a glass of wine in front of her. She looked different, lighter, somehow, like a weight had been lifted from her shoulders. I slid into the seat across from her, nodding toward her drink. Wine, huh? She smirked. Whiskey makes me reckless. I chuckled. Fair. The waiter appeared, and I ordered a drink, then leaned back, studying her. How are you really feeling? I asked. She considered the question for a moment, rolling the stem of her wine glass between her fingers. You know what's weird? What? I thought I'd be devastated. She took a sip. I thought finding out about the affair would break me. But now that it's done, now that it's out in the open, I just feel relief. I nodded slowly. I get that. She tilted her head. Do you? I met her gaze, searching for the answer in my own mind. Then I nodded. Yeah. She smiled, but there was something sad about it. Guess we both wasted a lot of time on the wrong people, huh? Guess so. We clinked glasses, and for the first time in days, I felt something real. Not anger. Not betrayal. Just peace. And maybe, just maybe, the beginning of something new. The night after I signed the divorce papers, I slept better than I had in months. Not because I was over it. Not because I had healed. But because, for the first time in a long time, I wasn't carrying the weight of Scarlett anymore. For weeks, I had lived in the ruins of what we once were, picking up pieces of our shattered history, trying to make sense of how it all fell apart. But that night, as I lay in bed listening to the steady hum of the ceiling fan, I realized something simple and absolute. It didn't matter anymore. The past was the past, and I wasn't going to let it define my future. The morning was cold and crisp, the first real sign that summer had finally loosened its grip. I stood on my front porch, coffee in hand, watching as the neighborhood slowly came to life. Cars pulling out of driveways. Kids racing to catch the school bus. The world was moving forward, and I was too. Then my phone buzzed. I glanced down and saw one last message from Scarlett. 12:04 p.m. I hope you're happy, Caleb. I really do. I stared at the words for a moment, letting them sink in. No pleading. No attempts at rekindling what we had lost. Just an ending. And for the first time since this nightmare started, I smiled. Then I put my phone away and stepped back inside, ready for whatever came next. Life after Scarlett was strange. At first, I expected the silence to be unbearable, the absence of her voice, her laughter, the simple weight of her presence in the house we had built together. But it wasn't. It was peaceful. I didn't realize how much space she had taken up in my life until she was gone. How much of myself I had sacrificed to keep our marriage afloat. Now, I had time. Time to rediscover things I had neglected. Time to focus on myself for once. I started going to the gym again. Nothing crazy, just enough to feel like I was in control of my own body. I picked up an old hobby, woodworking, something I hadn't touched since college. I even signed up for a weekend hiking trip, something Scarlett would have hated. And slowly, day by day, the hole she left behind didn't feel so empty anymore. Elena and I stayed in touch. At first, it was because of them, Scarlett and Lucas. We checked in, shared updates, kept each other informed on the inevitable fallout. But eventually, we stopped talking about them altogether. It turned into something else. Something real. We started grabbing coffee on weekends. Sometimes dinner. Nothing planned. Nothing serious. Just two people figuring out how to exist in this new reality. One night, she called me out of the blue. Can't sleep? I asked, recognizing the quiet heaviness in her voice. She let out a soft laugh. Yeah, you. I glanced at the clock, 2:13 a.m. Same. A pause. Then, hesitantly, do you ever wonder if we should have seen it coming? I thought about that for a moment. Did I miss the signs? The late nights? The sudden distance? The shift in the way Scarlett looked at me? Maybe. But I also knew one thing for sure. If you're constantly searching for red flags in your marriage, it's already too late. I don't think it matters, I said finally. The only thing that does is that we're not them. She was quiet for a long time before finally whispering, yeah, you're right. Neither of us hung up. We just stayed on the line, listening to each other breathe, two people who understood what it meant to have their world turned upside down and still survive it. Months passed. I saw Scarlett once, by accident. I was in line at a cafe when I heard her laugh. It was instinctual, the way my body reacted to the sound, my head turning before I even had time to process it. She was sitting by the window, stirring a cup of tea, talking to a friend. She looked good. Healthy. She must have felt my gaze because suddenly she turned. For a brief moment, our eyes met. Then, slowly, she smiled. Not a hopeful smile. Not an apologetic one. Just acceptance. I nodded back. That was it. No words. No closure. No grand speeches. Just two people who had once been everything to each other. Now nothing more than a memory. Elena and I never talked about what we were. We didn't need to. Some nights, we met for dinner. Other nights, we just sat on my back porch, drinking wine and watching the stars. She told me about her childhood. How she used to climb onto the roof of her house at night just to feel like she was part of something bigger. I told her about my father. How he used to take me fishing every Sunday, even though I hated it, because he said men need something quiet to keep them sane. And somewhere in between all of those nights, between all of those moments, I stopped thinking about Scarlett. I stopped wondering if I had failed her. I stopped wondering if I had done something wrong. Because the truth was, she wasn't my person. And I wasn't hers. Maybe we never were. One night, as we sat outside, Elena turned to me and asked, "Do you think we'll ever love someone again?" I looked at her then, really looked at her. She wasn't just Lucas's ex-wife anymore. And I wasn't just Scarlett's ex-husband. We were something else now. I think, I said slowly, that when the right person comes along, we won't even have to ask. She smiled, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was exactly where I was meant to be. A year later, I moved out of the house. It wasn't because I wanted to escape the memories. It wasn't because I needed a fresh start. It was because I didn't need it anymore. I packed up what little I wanted to keep and left the rest behind. The furniture Scarlett had picked out, the art she had hung on the walls, the life we had built together, frozen in time. Elena helped me move. We didn't talk about it. She just showed up with coffee and a playlist of bad 90s music, and we packed in comfortable silence. At the end of the day, as we stood in the empty living room, she turned to me with a small smile. "You ready?" I exhaled, looking around one last time. Then I nodded. "Yeah." And as I stepped outside, locking the door behind me, I realized something simple and absolute. I had finally moved on. The past was the past, and the future was waiting.